I keep telling people about how human history is so much older than what people realize. I'm actually going to kind of use the Bible to the degree here, but I'm going to pull things that are older than what we know of as the Bible today. Bear with me, follow along, see how it feels. I don't really have anything to show as absolute proof, but you're talking about things that are millions of years old. So, in the Bible, you have Adam and Eve as the first two humans, more or less. Now, the story in the Bible is a retelling of a retelling of a retelling of a retelling, and some of them have origins with points in time that are later than the origin itself. Why is that? Because history repeats itself when you don't learn from it. So, the scenario of Adam and Eve is something that's replayed several times in the grand scheme of things. Only once for our timeline. So, you go a little bit further back, and I always wind up getting pulled to Adamon. Some people say it's just because it's so close to Adonai, and I kind of have a fixation with all the things like that. But I think there's something else to it. So, the scenario that we have in the Bible of Adam and Eve, when you really look at it, looks an awful lot like some sort of elaborate uh, zoo enclosure, if you will. They can't go past a certain point. They can hear voices, they can see people cheering, but once they leave, they can't return to it. There's a lot of different scenarios that could explain this, and there's actually several that have happened. But one of the first things that you need to recognize is these stories' origins don't originate on Earth. They have echoes of things that have happened here on Earth. But the stories themselves don't originate on Earth. So, you have Adonai and Eva, I think is what it was. And they have crash landed on a planet. This planet would have essentially been the original Eden. But Eden would not have been the planet's name. That would have been where the concept for the enclosure that would have later been called Eden would have been all about. But once you start combining things like dimensional travelers and aliens and things like that, people start going, oh, well, you're just some sort of kook. Well, wait a minute. Does it or does it not say God created everything? Would that not include aliens? I don't know. To me, it seems like a no brainer. But for some reason, you go and you pose some question like that to anybody dealing with any sort of religion, and they want to feel insulted. This, to me, screams of the same what you might call sin, or what I wind up terming misunderstanding, that would have put Christ on the cross. Anybody who thinks that there was some necessity to having a human sacrifice so that we can somehow connect with God again, when you really think about what people are believing without even attempting to question, you kind of have to scratch your head. If you actually have a clear view of the reality of things past what most people see, you just got to scratch your head again, because, quite frankly, the truth is far stranger. Earth is a petri dish. It is the cosmic America melting pot. It is a place of exile, but the way the concept flows, it isn't just an exile, it's a fresh start, clean slate. Amnesty, uh, all those concepts kind of roll into one without quite. It's none of them and all of them all at the same time. There are parts of all of them that don't quite fit. So now you have the Earth, which, because of the level of awareness, is essentially little more than a glorified prison. And you have people, and when I say people, you can't think along physical terms. You've got to think energetic, spiritual lines. Uh, these things, you don't end when you die. Death is the end of one thing and the beginning of another. It's still you, it's just a different you. Anyway, you can ponder that one later. So, we've got multiple stories of essentially the same thing in a myriad of different ways. The story of Adam echoes in a way that doesn't fit with classical religious belief. It's a half retelling in the Bible. I wanted to say retelling, but it's not exactly. It's diminished isn't quite the right word. Altered, obviously, but there's best way I can describe it is something gets lost in translation. And quite frankly, that goes back to the simple fact that words are a translation of fact to begin with. So, okay. You can see why I have a hard time putting some things into words, because the things that I look at, think about, and deal with on a daily basis, words can't touch. They can describe, they can paint a type of picture, but they can never really touch the source of whatever it is they're describing. That's how you know that it's a construct within a construct. It should be obvious that it's a construct within a construct, simply because words didn't come before people. How did people communicate before there were words? There's far more to our own communication than words, that because of our insistent and persistent reliance on auditory words and symbols, and that insane thinking that words must be able to define a thing, which, look at any definition. Tell me that really defines something. Is there anything missing somehow, even though you can't put your finger on it? Something that you can't put words to? Every single definition. Everyone. So, if words are a construct within a construct and we've been ignoring it, what kind of chaos can that unleash? We're not paying attention to what we need to be anymore. Even though a majority of the communication we have today is actually body language, intonation, things that we never even think of when we're speaking English or Spanish or Italian. And though I have no direct proof right now, I am 90% convinced that by utilizing the mechanics of what communication is, not what we think of communication, but what communication actually is. Good examples: look at animals. How do they communicate? It's not the same, but oftentimes it's far more intuitive. So, what is it that the animals have that we don't? See, now we're thinking, well, it's diminishing humans. No, it's not. It's recognizing where we're failing and doing something about it. Learning. If you know where your limits are, you can test your limits without you destroying yourself. That's how you get stronger. That's how you grow. You can already see I'm getting lost in my own conversation because it branches off in so many different directions. I keep trying to focus back on Adam and the different stories and what that actually means. Something keeps getting in the way, and yet at the same time, I'm telling you without telling you. If you really look at what I've been saying, you'll see what I'm saying. Because it all fits together. It really does. I have no way of being able to truthfully describe it. I can describe it from my perspective. The problem with that is that everybody's perspective is different. It might be similar, but nobody's going to know what your perspective actually is until you learn how to use it. You can't describe to somebody who's always been blind what red is. Well, I'm telling you that this is something very much like that on a different level. All you got to do is wake up to it. Everybody has it. That's what Jesus Christ was trying to tell everybody. That's why everybody that's a Christian that sits there and pounds the Bible and says, oh, well, you need to believe, you need to obey, you need to follow. Think about what you're saying real quick. Look at your own fictional work, really. Fiction work built of truths. That's the best way you can describe it, because it isn't pointless. It is not powerless. It holds power. It holds a hell of a lot of truth if you'll know how to sift it out. All of it has purpose. What is the sand? What is the glass? And where are the diamonds? They're in there. They aren't focused on by any church. Because if you focused on the truth of the Bible, damn near every church would fall. I can't think of a way that a church could remain when people actually know the truth of what they're claiming to follow actually is. A lot of people want to say that I'm diminishing Jesus Christ. That's your prerogative and your perspective. The view that I have of my current understanding of the story of Jesus Christ is far more powerful than the watered down, withered, faded expectations turned to dogma, turned to chains. I can't, for the life of me, I cannot understand how anybody can believe that crap. I called my dad on it when I was 4 years old. And I was the black sheep scapegoat ever since. He still won't recognize me. And he knows that I recognize him. And he won't admit it. When somebody recognizes the power they hold, they aren't jumping up and down for joy and with excitement, because they recognize the responsibility of that power. It would be very difficult to train a 3-year-old how to properly handle, not even use, but properly handle a gun. Very difficult. And when you realize what power you have, you are in the position of that 3-year-old holding a gun. It has the power to do great things. It also has the power to completely wreck you. You need to respect it. How do you do that? You respect yourself. How do you respect yourself? You see yourself in the things around you. If you respect yourself in them, everything comes together. That's why the one and only commandment that Christ ever actually backed was love one another. In one scripture, he says it twice. If you really look at the context of it, you'll recognize why. He was essentially playing spy back in those days. He was having to deal with hostile presences from the Romans, from the Sadducees, which were essentially law-based, and you could equate them to our police today, roughly. Okay, it's a stretch, but still, roughly. You also had the Pharisees, which would essentially equate to your pulpit pounders today. The ones that are holding the book saying, you need to do what you're told. Now, if you think of the type of situation that Christ was actually in, the moment that he was being quoted in a lot of the scriptures, you have to look at it as if, for at least an American, I'll take it from my point of view and try to get the right feel for it. So, with those 3 groups going after him, that would equate to government, which would include Secret Service, FBI, CIA, all that wonderful stuff. You would also have to include the local police forces, as well as any military and all that, as well as your Coast Guard and, those. And on top of everything else, you think of, let's take some of these abortion clinics for one, and look at how violent some of those self-professed Christians get in, at, around, or because of an abortion clinic. Now, do I agree with abortion? No, I don't exactly agree with abortion. That's my own personal thing. However, that said, if I was to ever have a woman of any age come to me saying, I have your kid and I'm going to get an abortion. I'll try to talk to her, but it's her body, it's her choice. That child is not born. And as cruel as it may sound, until that child pops out and starts crying, it's nothing but a bag of flesh. I say this coming from the standpoint of somebody who kind of remembers what the journey was like coming here, being born. I used to remember a lot more, but that is one thing that I will never forget either. You can call it a rainbow tunnel. It's not really a rainbow tunnel. You can describe it as a light at the end of a tunnel. But here's an experiment for you that might help to clarify things if you can kind of put two and two together. I want you to find one of those computer fractal programs where you can zoom into it and everything changes and all that. And I want you to simply zoom in just as fast as you can. No matter where you are during that, it's still your perspective. But if somebody else was to attempt to do the same thing with the same fractal, they would have a different perspective. It's really hard to describe this concept because it is interdimensional. It is a basic principle of reality. The reality that I'm speaking from this human body, as I've said before, is a simulation. The body itself is an avatar. It is based off of a reality that you currently don't remember. And you don't remember it for a good reason. You will remember it, just not while you're alive this life. Side note, that's something that with apocalypse and mass awakening, apocalypse, the proper term, mind you, not your fanatic term, it's something that will actually start happening more and more. Because people are going to start recognizing what makes this realm so difficult. Casual denial. Anything that would make it easier for you to just ignore, you ignore. And it's not that I'm saying you personally, because everybody in America, at least, has been trained to do this their entire lives for generations. That was actually something I told my dad when I was 4 years old, too. It's funny, there's some specifics that I haven't been able to remember of that particular conversation for decades. and they're starting to come back to me. I know this is essentially a built-in time lock mechanism, essentially. If I am remembering some of the things that I spoke to in earnest with my dad at 4 years old, then things are finally starting to come into alignment. Feels like the right word. It's not alignment of space. You're not going to get an idea. Well, you might get an idea from the planets, but you're not going to get this from the planets. Everything echoes itself, so you're always going to get an idea from everything else. It doesn't matter what you decide to focus on. This is something that is more ethereal, but it's something that never quite changes. It's something that everybody feels and few people recognize that they do feel. If I'm going to make a comparison to that, it's like somebody being born sick, and if they never wind up being made healthy, how do they know they're sick? They're going to live life as if it's, the way things always are. They don't know any different. There's just so much that people flat out ignore because it just doesn't seem possible. I have such a hard time with that word, impossible. There is nothing that's impossible. There are things that people refuse to recognize. There's a big difference there. But we mistake it for the same thing because of how we've been taught. And we don't know any better because we haven't even been taught the truth. We don't know our human history in truth. We have no idea where we were before Gilgamesh, before Atlantis, before Pangea. Take a good look at some of the artifacts from the past that have been discovered. The first thing you're going to notice is they display the things that are obscure, that look fancy, nice, pretty. Um, the true wealth of any museum is never on display. Never. It's not diamonds, gold, or rubies. There is very little actual value in the stuff displayed in museums, with a few exceptions. The ones that actually have value, it goes beyond simply being priceless because of historic value. It goes to a resonance and follows all the same what you might call principles, attributes, I don't know, take your pick, fill in the blank, of what people would have described as magical items, artifacts, relics. They hold the ability to allow you to tap into things that are already there. Essentially, all the things that have the greatest power are magical crutches. They're tools. All tools are a form of crutch. Once you recognize how they're a form of crutch, you can actually strengthen yourself. And if you don't need the crutch, you can use the crutch for a lot of other things other than what you were using it for. You can already picture that. I don't think I need to go into some sort of lame example, however imaginative it might be. I'm already at nearly 40 minutes. It seems like I could just keep on going, and I just can't stay focused on that atom line. I think you might understand what I'm saying if you've made it to this point in the video. Well, Rising Angel signing off.